If you are not willing to try new things and experiment with different ways of working or changes to your process to create better results, then you're never going to get better. And practically speaking, you're only going to get worse.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 78, A Day in the Life of a SRE. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darren and Victor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darren reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Victor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darren Pope and Victor Farson.
So this week, we've decided to have another podcast host on with us. How did this come about, Victor?
I don't know. Maybe we are getting out of ideas.
That's very possible.
So we need to bring people with ideas.
Well, that's what's in our intro, right? We bring people on because we don't know what we're talking about, so
Exactly.
it's okay. Today we have Adam Hawkins. Is it Hawkins or Hawkins?
Hawkins.
Hawkins. Sorry, I was trying to give you at least a little bit of Stephen Hawking's love there, but it didn't work. Adam is the host of the Small Batches podcast, or just Small Batches podcast. Probably no "the" required. How you doing, Adam? You doing pretty good today?
Yeah, doing good. Happy to be here and talk through some stuff with everybody.
Cool. So, in Adam's real life, he is an SRE. He's not just a cool podcast host, right? He actually has a day job, just like Victor and myself do. So, once you explain a little bit, if you want to say who you work for, that's great. If not, that's great too. But explain sort of what your day-to-day role looks like.
Yeah. So I work as a staff SRE at Skillshare. You may have seen Skillshare from a ton of YouTube ads. They market everywhere. They do online learning. You can go to Skillshare, sign up, and you get access to all these courses. They primarily target creatives, a lot of classes for things like Adobe Photoshop, freelancers, like marketing, some stuff for podcast production, video production, this type of stuff. So in my work as an SRE, I primarily focus on enabling teams in the sort of you build it, you run it model. Practically speaking, I do a lot of continuous delivery type things, like building pipelines, making sure that there's appropriate checks in the pipelines, monitoring, and really focusing on being an advocate for the 4 metrics in accelerate, deployment frequency, lead time, change failure rate, and MTTR, and ensuring that our team and our organization can move at a high velocity so we can succeed as a business. It's not necessarily probably the typical role you'd see as an SRE, but we're sort of a small team. Like right now, we're about 35 engineers. I think that those ideas, like the principles of DevOps, those metrics are a great way to focus teams and keep them sort of aligned to a vision of what success looks like for an engineering team.
So what does enabling a team mean in your context?
Well, I chose the word enabling specifically because this is actually one of the different interaction modes from the book Team Topologies. So the book Team Topologies sets out a few different team types and different ways that these different teams interact. Like one of them is enabling. So I'm not sure what all of your experience is, but working as somebody who's kind of moved from backwards from writing user-facing software and then building APIs and then doing infrastructure, then moving into SRE, you get further and further away from the things that directly provide value to the business. Because of that, you get farther away from the code. but those problems and those capabilities still exist in the organization. It's not really possible for one team to own everything, maybe not own, but like fully understand everything. For example, I can't understand React. That's just outside of my wheelhouse. If I have to write software like that, somebody's going to have to come and enable me in some way, either by like showing me how to use our internal tools or whatever structures we have in place. What I do as an SRE is try to enable teams and engineers to work at like different levels of this U build that you run it. So in practice, this means like teaching people how to use our continuous delivery tools, teaching people how to add monitoring and alerting into their production environment, showing people how to construct deployment pipelines, like kind of bootstrapping sort of the initial structure where that they can come in and add, or they can grow upon that, but making sure that whatever the different teams put in place hits sort of the minimum viable requirements as we have defined them as an engineering team at Skillshare.
I had a sinister reason for asking you what does enable mean, because in many of the companies I work with, enabling means you have to use this tool. And if you want this done, you need to open 7 Jira tickets and things like that. If I understood right, what you mean by enable, you mean enable. You are really treating them as your customers in a way.
Exactly. In the sense that, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I never want to be on the critical path of anybody else's work, right? Especially, being like an SRE and coming like in the intersection of like infrastructure, software design that hits a whole bunch of different layers in the whole stack. SRE tends to hit a lot of those different things. So like I try to just make sure that people know what to do, how to do it, and if they need help doing so, then do it so that they can execute outside of like us or myself as dependencies getting their work into production.
I'm going to restate what Victor said. You're actually doing enabling on the positive side and not on the negative side. Meaning, sometimes you'll hear people say, okay, you're enabling an addict with something versus enabling somebody to really help somebody. That's the positive versus the negative. You brought up the Team Topologies book. For any very astute listeners, you may remember episode 51 where Adam Sandor was on with us fighting with Victor, which ended up being more of a love fest than a fight. That's where we first talked about Team Topologies, the book itself. And one question I have is, you were talking about when you're trying to get your customers going, you onboard them with your CD tools, talk to them about monitoring and alerting. Mm-hmm. Do you allow people to actually deploy anything if proper monitoring and alerting is not in place?
No.
Well, that's not enabling.
How so?
Because you're stopping product from shipping something just because of a stupid rule that they have to have monitoring and alerting in place.
Well, I can't tell if the stupid rule is being facetious or not. But part of the enabling, I think, comes from, in order to build and deploy code properly, you have to meet a certain set of requirements. And that set of requirements may not be what every single engineer is familiar with. So you might have engineers who have never deployed code to production. You might have engineers who have, worked at senior level and have gone through this whole process. But part of the enabling mode, in my mind, is making sure that all these different criteria are met. And I would rather have us hit this minimum bar in production rather than ship something to production that didn't meet that minimum bar and have longer or more negative ramifications in production. So you can think of it definitely as a gate. And I think the gate is a big part of the sort of enabling. I mean, enabling doesn't necessarily mean do whatever you want. You can just deploy untested code to production. I mean, that will kind of be the opposite. I mean, that would definitely be enabling them, but that will not necessarily be enabling the business in my mind.
Talk to a product owner. They'll tell you that's the exact opposite. If you're telling me I cannot ship a feature that is required because I don't have my monitoring and alerting in place, product's going to have your head.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But the sort of the layer that I'm talking about is more from a service level, not necessarily like the specific stuff for a certain feature. For example, like if you're going to deploy a new service to production that doesn't have any kind of telemetry for, say, like HTTP requests or like success rates or any of these kind of things, well, then that doesn't meet the bar to deploy to production. Once you have certain services in production and then you have these like more fine-grained features, then like personally, I'm willing to just let that go with the assumption that the team who's building that thing, if they need to monitor that like that specific thing, then they will. That's sort of like at the level that you're talking about, Darren. I'm willing to just sort of let that one go.
We're talking more or less, if I understood right, about having some rails. Does that mean that, for example, if I would be working now with you, if I meet those bars, let's say, or don't go out of those rails, is it that, hey, any way I can accomplish that with or without your help is good, right? Or
Yeah.
no?
I think that's fair.
Is it more about making sure that certain objectives are met, no matter the path taken, or you need to follow a strict path? Kind of, it needs to be like this or that.
It's a little bit of both. I think that every organization walks this line a bit differently. So, of course, like starting from the first principles, right? Say if you're going to launch a new service into production, then you're going to have, I mean, this might come, I don't think it's a surprise to say, but you need to have automated tests, okay? I mean, that might be new for some people, but if you put that in some sort of, requirements, then they'll have to be met. And I don't necessarily care so much about how that happens, but the fact that you have an automated test suite that says, hey, I made a change, it's been tested, the test passed, therefore I'm confident I can deploy this code to production. You can create that test suite however you want. You don't necessarily you don't require like SRE involvement in that by design, but you can of course ask for help. And that sort of goes for all of the other sort of like high level requirements. Like for example, that you have log streaming, you have telemetry, you have some way to do zero downtime deploys, you have perhaps say a Canary release process, you have some SLOs established, you have alerts that trigger somebody on pager duty, you have a process in place to detect and resolve production issues. That's sort of the high level objectives. And then I think every engineering team takes from those sort of first principles and then defines some either like well-trodden paths, like, hey, at company X, we use language Y and tool Z, we integrate them like this. This is the well-trodden path that you can, follow and copy and it will work. But, feel free to go off and do your own thing if you can meet all these requirements using a different set of tools. Whereas at Skillshare, we have a more like prescriptive set of tools. Like, hey, at Skillshare, we use PHP and Node.js. So like if you use Node.js, then you're going to be using these set of libraries that have been written internally. They're going to be integrated in this way. And by using all of those things that have been already written internally, then you can say that, hey, it's already met all the different criteria. Now write the code in such a way that you maintain these requirements as you build out the service in question.
What is the expectation from those, I don't know how you call them, application teams maybe? What is the expectation from experience and knowledge perspective? Beyond, you need to be able to write the code of your application, kind of like that's a given, right? But I'm really curious, how far do you go, right? Because I've seen both extremes. I don't want to write even Maven file, right? Kind of like that's not my job.
I think that is actually the really good question because that speaks to hiring, team composition, experience levels in the teams. I think at least at the level that we strive for is that team should be able to basically like greenfield something to deploy to production and operate it using some sort of off-the-shelf tools. It always comes to a question of like, where do you draw the line, right? So like we deploy to Kubernetes, okay? So like we, the SRE team, we run the cluster, right? But if somebody's deploying something, they're going to have their deployments and their services and all these type of things. We might help them write those manifests, but it's up to them. It's like when they deploy it to be able to troubleshoot it in that environment. And if they can't figure that out or they need help, they can, of course, ask like SRE, but it's their first responsibility to act in that model. But I've been on the other extremes, where it's like you said, they don't even expect there's a change to the Docker file or to the make file. Like, I can't do that. Somebody else should do that, Or like, for example, using something like Circle CI or CodeFresh, like these YAML files that define pipelines. Like, oh, nope, somebody else should touch that. That's not me. I can't do that. We go for the opposite where, hey, all of this is owned by your team. You have the capability to change it. You can modify it to meet your requirements. If you need help, ask, but you have the power to do that. You are the maintainer of your critical path. Change it as you see fit.
Does it include also pager duty? If something goes wrong in production and it's not a cluster, it's the application, who gets a call at 3 o'clock in the morning?
The application teams, given that we have a mapping between services and teams, or like high level like code areas or business areas and individual teams with the appropriate monitoring and alerting, say if something goes down or if there's an issue with, say, purchasing, like payments, right? There's a team who is responsible for that. They will get paged, and then they're the front lines. So if they receive the page and say, hey, I've gone through all this troubleshooting and it looks like there's something at this other layer, like the lower layer in the stack, they can escalate it to the person who is on call for, say, SRE or a different team. But there's a page duty rotation for all the different teams. I mean, without that, it doesn't work, right? Because if you don't have that, then you cut the feedback loop from production back to dev, which then defeats the whole purpose.
Exactly. But now here's a critical question from my side. There will be a follow-up one. Did you hire people to those roles, or did you transition them into such way of working?
Which roles?
I mean, not roles, sorry, but that level of ownership of applications. Is that how it always was?
It's probably a mix. I think Skillshare has been around for maybe like 4 or 5 years. Been with the company for a year and a half. I think they always had a higher level of ownership, but not necessarily complete autonomy, because there was a DevOps team or ops team handling some of this stuff. This is always the problem or the challenge when it comes to like brownfield versus greenfield projects in organizations with older code bases and team structures, whatever. But for new stuff, it's certainly more like that, where, hey, Team X creates this thing. They are the complete owners of it from time zero up to production, operating it, and eventually even decommissioning it. Whereas for some of the stuff that doesn't fit that model, and for engineers who have never operated in that way, then this is where SRE comes in back to the idea of enabling, giving them the tools and the knowledge and training or whatever it is that they need to be able to operate at that level, and also making it clear to people who come in the door that this is what's expected from them. That you can't just say, the make file needs to be changed, I will create a ticket in some other person's backlog. Like, no. If you need to change that, you need to figure out how to do it yourself. And if you can't, you need to ask, like, hey, I don't know how to do this, I need help. Like, what do I need to do so that you can do it?
What you're saying is very close to what I've been preaching, kind of, that's the way to go and all this stuff. Now, the answer that I get most of the time is that, yes, I agree, this is great. This is how things should be done, but we are special because, and then there is a lot of after that because.
Yeah, right? Some rambling.
Financial industry, we are this, we are that. There is always a reason why that is a good thing, except in somebody's case. Can you imagine why, ignoring now the fact that people cannot change easily overnight, kind of... Why is the rest of the industry then stuck? I mean, not rest. Most of the industry is stuck in that 75 departments. Life cycle of application is split between 85 groups and all that stuff.
That's a great question. And when you talk about the rest of the industry, it's always surprising how big the, quote, rest of the industry is. I read, don't quote me on this exact figure, but I read Mick Kirsten's book, Project to Product, and he estimates what percentage of companies has adopted this DevOps-y and high-velocity type way of building and delivering software. And it was significantly small. I'm talking like 2%, 3%, really small compared to the rest. And if you look at that, it's like 5% compared to 95%. Who knows why? Is it education? Is it understanding, or is it simply the fact that they haven't needed to, that business as usual is fine enough. One thing for us who work at tech companies, building software, it's easier for us to be on the forefront of these things. But say, if you work in retail, maybe you don't even think about software in the same way as part of your business, or see how it is important to change the ways of working to empower the business. I don't have a good answer as to how come so many people, or what large percentage of your organization doesn't think or act in this way, or industry, not organization, but why it's kind of still a small group of people. I don't know. But I think that's a challenge that we have as people who, or teams or organizations that are working like this, is to at least do what we can to spread the knowledge and try to help other organizations succeed also. I mean, it's kind of like a rising tide thing that, like, if we all, like as an industry, or work in such a way, then we'll have better products, we'll have better services that like we can use as customers of them also.
As the old guy here, I can give you two answers. First answer is, that's not the way we do it. The way we do it here is this way. That's answer one. The second answer, and I've heard this time and time again, is we don't trust our developers to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And my response to the second question or statement is always, then why did you hire them? Well, we needed somebody to do the work. I went, well, why didn't you hire the right people? Well, we needed somebody right now. I went, then you've put yourself in the problem.
But actually, those two answers are very valid.
They're valid. They're sadly valid.
Yeah.
To be honest, when I spend with some, not all, of course, let's say a few days with a huge company, I come to the same conclusion, kind of like, those people cannot do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the real question is, why did you train them not to be able to do that? That's kind of that's the real challenge. Everybody starts somewhere from a very low bar. Some people get used to it and then others don't. And it must be the environment.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if somebody says, like, you don't trust your coworkers, well, then you have an entirely different problem. You know?
Oh, it's not the coworkers. It's the managers saying they don't trust their people.
Okay. Well, you can even have it the other way, where other developers don't trust the other developers to do what they need to do. Like, it can go all sorts of ways, but definitely I agree with you in the sense of, if the managers don't trust the developers, then you're screwed in that way. Even the other way around, where higher level management thinks that continuous delivery is too dangerous. We cannot go fast without creating more risk. Like, I've been in organizations where that has been the top-down organizational position, that this is too dangerous, or we shouldn't do that. And the same thing can be said about things like remote work, where we've all been kind of forced into it now. But there is definitely a fear of new stuff. Maybe a fear, not like misunderstanding, but like fear and mistrust are, as you said, sadly true factors that inhibit adoption of these ways of working.
To me, the curious thing is that usually it is phrased as, we cannot do, let's say, continuous delivery because continuous delivery is too dangerous. While we know that it's not. If we start Googling right now, in 5 minutes, we're going to find just enough proof for anybody. That's not correct. What that sentence really usually means is that we don't know how to do it. And especially that I'm a manager, I don't even know what we're talking about. And those who know what they're talking about, they don't know what that is. I really get disappointed when I hear generalization of something that is your own personal or company or team inability to do something. We know that continuous delivery works, right? Maybe it's not perfect for every single organization, but it works. It produces results. I mean, look at Google, Amazon, Apple. I mean, what makes you think that you know better?
Well, right. Part of the other thing, too, is that some of these things that seem true on their face are sort of like anti-patterns in thinking. Like the misconception about continuous delivery is that if you go fast, you're going to break things more. What is it, that saying from Facebook, like move fast and break things? But people associate that with the idea of continuous delivery. As you said, Victor, you can just go online and find out now that continuous delivery is, in fact, the actual safest way to build software. But if you only thought about it on its face, you might see how it was going against that. And the same thing goes to automated testing. I haven't had this sort of conversation for a while, but you still encounter people who will think that automated testing actually slows down the whole process and it has a negative impact. If I hear that, I'm almost go completely white-faced because I'm just so surprised that somebody would like say that now. But there's so much evidence to the contrary that, in fact, the only way to succeed is with automated testing.
Yes, but that's the difference. In reality, if you look specific organization, specific company, then actually what you just said is true, because automated testing is slowing them down because it's flaky, so they need to rerun it 50 times until it passes. And because you're still going to do manual testing after your automated testing. So why did you invest in automated testing? Now, I'm not saying in any form or way that that's the way to do, but when you look at the sorry state of the actual implementation of testing in many companies, you say, I say also, I don't understand, why did you invest years in this? I don't understand, why did you do that?
Yeah, I know. I've been there too. The worst thing about some of these things is that if you adopt them sort of like halfway, they don't work, right? You end up with some automated test suite that takes a long time. It's flaky. Maybe it doesn't cover all the things that you expect it to do. You can't really trust it. And then it becomes this unfortunate ceremony of adding tests or rerunning them just to get it green, but to what purpose? I think this comes back to one of the other things that we mentioned pre-recording. There's a sort of a continuum between where you start and like where you want to go. And this comes back also to your point about hiring people to work in a certain way, is that you need experienced people to lead these things to make sure they don't devolve into these things like these implementations that take years of time or that just lead to the exact opposite result of what you want. Like the practices that teams and organizations put in place at the very beginning of their life tend to live on for a very long time. If you can get those things right, that's an amazing success.
But now that you mentioned hiring, that's similar to when company doesn't do well, usually they change their CEO, CTO, they change a person on the top. Now, what surprises me is that why not apply the same thing to engineers? And in this context, I don't mean change, but effectively, I believe that the only way, especially in larger organizations, to make that change is to bring fresh blood, give them a project, and then make it success, and then start spreading that to the existing organization. If somebody hasn't succeeded in doing that for 20 years, what makes you think that you're making a decision right now? I make a decision, you're going to do automated tests today, and suddenly it's going to be beautiful. It's not. At least I never saw it.
Oh, yeah. And if you look at the literature, the model that you're suggesting, at least, is probably one of the best ways to do that, is to bring in people who aren't tainted by the status quo, try to remove the status quo from their work as much as possible, give them a project with clear objectives, and say, figure out the best way to do that. And just let them first trust them to do that, right? Very important. And then just let them go. And then learn from that, double down if it works, and then figure out how to spread that in the organization. I wouldn't necessarily call it a takeover, but it's almost like a progressive rollout of a different way of working. The power there comes from you can prove it. Like you can say, hey, we did this experiment with this new team. We gave them this. It worked. And that's the thing that convinces the people who are like, I don't know about this, or I'm uncertain, I don't know how to do it. It's right here. Follow this. Like we've already done it, taking the unknown and turning it into at least a known and perhaps even a prescriptive solution. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, because otherwise you're locked into that endless conversation. I say this, you say this, I say it works, you say it doesn't work. We are special, and you never get anywhere without that proof, and that proof cannot be done without drastic change.
Or perhaps without the curiosity to experiment, which, to bring this back to the third way of DevOps, that's in the title or the name. If you are not willing to try new things and experiment with different ways of working or changes to your process to create better results, then you're never going to get better. And practically speaking, you're only going to get worse. You're not going to even maintain. You'll just degrade over time. If you're not willing to experiment, then you're not willing to change, and then you're just dead, like you're dead in the water, at least from the growth perspective.
Well, we're too busy to experiment. I can't hire somebody experienced because I can hire 3 other people for the same amount of money. So 3 people will be better than one really good person. What are the other things that I hear almost on a daily basis.
Is that the Mythical Man month right there?
You're breaking out an old one there. It's partially Mythical Man month, but it's just most large companies. Like today, you said you have 35 engineers roughly on staff, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's easy for you to do this.
Right.
I go to clients that have 10,000, 20,000 developers.
Mm-hmm.
They're still building all their VMs by hand, and it takes 12 months to get a VM through a Jira ticket. That's not going to change, ever. If you want to retire, that's the place you want to go work. Which is fine.
I wouldn't say it's never going to change. Sometimes it does change, but the more important thing is that survival is optional.
Yes.
It's not God-given that we are all going to survive, that every single company is going to survive. And hey, if it happened to TV industry with Netflix, it can happen to others.
Well, it's really not going to change if you're thinking too big. If your first objective is to roll something out to the whole organization, that's only going to work if your organization is sufficiently small. It's definitely not going to work if you have 10,000, 1,000, or even like X hundred, even 35 people or 20 people. How do you actually influence and change people or change like ways of working? That's a really hard problem. Once you get beyond 2 people, it's hard. It's even hard for 2 people.
I think that the whole approach that is taken, and now I'm building on top of what you said, Darin, is wrong. You get to a certain position in a big company, 10,000 people, and then you start making plans how to change 10,000 people. And that's just horribly wrong. That's never going to work. You need to figure out how you're going to get to those 10 people. And then once you get to those 10 people, how you're going to convert them into 50 people. And then from 50 to, I don't know, a couple of hundred, and so on and so forth. Ultimate goal might be 10,000. But the problem is that I too often see those plans. Oh, now we have this project that will convert the whole company, whole 10,000 people into cloud native. And that is the problem from the very beginning. Before you even started thinking about the steps, you made a huge mistake. You have envisioned something that is not doable.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same thing as if we say, okay, we have this 10-year-old application, that is, old, horrible, how we're going to rewrite that application. If that's your thinking, you're going to fail. Now, if you start thinking about how we're going to remove this tiny part of that application and make it better, and that's going to be 1% of that monster, but it's going to be better, and then we're going to figure out how we're going to increase that 1% into 3, then you're on the right track. But to me, it's the same thing like refactoring 10 years old application developed by a couple of hundred people during those 10 years. If you create a new architecture for that application, it's going to fail. Same thing with people.
Yeah. And the only way to make real progress is by incremental updates. If you happen to be in a position where you can just burn it all down and recreate it, it's a different thing. But it's more predictable to make incremental changes, as you said, Victor. Refactoring an application or breaking down a monolith or changing organization, like even restructuring teams, all these things, more predictable and successful ways to do it in small batches.
Oh, and right there, another promotion for your podcast. I heard that. And that's probably a good place to sort of wrap up. Adam is, again, the host. Just a host, right? You do it all by yourself?
Mostly. So I had been doing episodes, like I pre-write them and record them. They're like 5 to 8 minutes. So they're small on purpose.
Small batches, yes.
Yeah.
Unlike this one, which will be longer.
Yeah, but that's okay. I started doing more interviews to keep it fresh. So like half interviews and half just me.
So go check it out wherever you listen to fine podcasts. That is Small Batches. Look for the name Adam Hawkins, just in case. Small Batches. Do you have any competitors with that same name?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, I looked up one today that I was listening to, and there were like 20 with the exact same name. I'm like, okay, I have to add the host name in there as well.
Yeah, it's probably whiskey or coffee or something to do with drinking.
It wasn't that. You've never listened to here. I don't drink.
Oh.
I'm one of the. I don't drink coffee. I don't drink alcohol.
I do all those things for.
He does all those, so he makes up for it. Like my wife and daughter make up for the coffee part. Victor makes up for the alcohol part.
Well, that's admirable. I couldn't do that.
Let's just call it. I have a very addictive personality, and we're talking about guardrails. I have my boundaries, and I know where those are.
Me too. I'm also very addictive, but that's why I have a lot of alcohol.
Yeah. Sometimes the best way to write some code is to have a little scotch.
Wow. Okay. Maybe that would be one of the taglines for this week. To write better code, have a little scotch.
Yeah, it unlocks your brain a little bit, in my experience.
All right. Adam, thanks for hanging out with us today. If people want to get in touch with you, where's the best place they can find out about you?
Just go to smallbatches.fm. You'll have a link to the podcast and a link to my website and ways to contact me.
And that link will also be down in the show notes. Or if you're actually watching this on YouTube, it will be down in the description as well. Adam, thanks for hanging out with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Victor.
We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.